Welcome to Growing Your Firm, brought to you by Jetpack Workflow. We're here to help firms unlock the secrets to help you reach your goals faster. And now, here's your host, founder and CEO of Jetpack Workflow, David Cristello.
Hey everybody, David Cristello here, founder and CEO of Jetpack Workflow and host of Growing Your Firm. Today I'm humbled to have the podcaster, or I guess the one of two podcasters in the space that have really made a run of things. I'm really excited to have David Leary back on the show. He's a partner at Earmark Media, which runs a few different plays in the space, one of which I'm sure most of our listeners are familiar with, the accounting podcast, previously called the Cloud Accounting Podcast. David, I first saw you walking around in a bright green blazer years ago, and it's just been really fun to see everything you've been involved in since. I know that was a whole different lifetime ago, but all that to say, David, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad to. Was I actually on the show before? I don't even know. Maybe.
You know, we've talked so many times. I guess it's just one giant blur at this point, right? We're gonna pull it up.
Podcast.
We'll pull it up in the show notes. One of us will owe the other person, I don't know, a cup of coffee the next time we see each other in person.
Yeah, that works.
So Earmark Media, help the listeners unpack that. And for folks maybe not familiar with the accounting podcast, tell us a little bit of high level what that is.
Yeah, so I'll kind of give the quick rewind of history. Just like, great conferences, you meet people and you're like, let's do something. And I knew Blake from social, but I met Blake really face to face at Expensify's conference, the first Expensicon. And, everybody's beer, let's do a podcast together. 2 years later, Blake finally has me as a guest on his podcast. And so he did like 2 episodes or 3 episodes, has me on. And I said, let's just do this every week. And then we just started doing it every week. So that was like April of 2018. And now where are we? July of 2023. So we've been doing this every single week. And it was the Cloud Accounting Podcast. We recently just rebranded to the Accounting Podcast. But early in that journey, listeners started asking if they could get CPE credit for listening to podcasts. Well, Blake went on a journey with NASBA, and I think COVID helped. NASBA was a little bit more open to alternative ways to get CPE. And the result of that is an app called Earmark. So everybody can go to the Apple Store, the Google Play Store. They can download this app called Earmark, and you can listen to a podcast and get CPE credit. We also do IRSC as well, right? So that's the app. But in the middle, we also have a production company. So like we have the Cloud Accounting, the Accounting Podcast. We have Oh My Fraud, which is a true crime podcast. We have the Accounting Twins podcast. We have a whole umbrella, the federal tax updates. We have a whole umbrella, hopefully, of a bell curve of accounting podcasts, because we have a vested interest in having great accounting content out there. But that's kind of the gist of how we got there is listeners started asking for CPE. We never, when I left Intuit in 2018 and Blake left the companies he was at, neither one of us were like, let's go build a CPE company. It just It happened because listeners started asking for it. Yeah.
And has the show always been looking at, the most relevant topics of today? Like it's very topical, right? So if something gets passed, something gets updated, there's a news story that intertwines with accounting. Has that been from day one the format of the show?
Yes, pretty much. It's been a news show. I think in the beginning, we were really worried, like, oh, can we even do 20 minutes? And now we're like, we could do 2 hours an episode every Friday morning now. But it's evolved. Like it was a little bit more app news heavy in the beginning and a little bit more on the technology. And it's slowly kind of expanded out where we'll touch on AI and remote work and the 150-hour rule with the pipeline problem. It's going all directions. Now the politics, we talk about IRS, we talk about Congress. Like it's just kind of gone. And that's why we rebranded. We dropped the cloud because the industry's kind of past the word cloud now, but we cover so much more of the entire landscape of accounting. And if you start stepping back, every news story is an accounting story, right? It has some tax stuff or accounting stuff. Every single news story, you step back and there's an accounting story in there. And so we just kind of relate it. And really what we cover the news, but we're kind of a news commentary show, right? So, if you're listening, you kind of get a compressed weeks of news with some commentary around it, right? And I think between the both of us, we probably each plow through 1,500 articles a week. And then we show up with our 20 stories we think we want to have on the show. And
How many articles a week?
probably 1,500 each. Like we plow, because there's so much garbage. So we're really providing a service, right? We're
I didn't know.
plowing through so
I didn't know.
much
Yeah.
garbage.
Well, I mean, this is the premise of some of the pods I listen to, right? It's like it's a filter, right? You
Yeah.
don't. You can go to social platforms for a fire hose. You can go to news sites for a fire hose. You don't know what's worth investigating or not. And I don't know if we're going to go down this rabbit hole or not. But look, if somebody's listening to this podcast, you probably listen to other podcasts. If you listen to podcasts, you're probably on social. You're probably looking at blogs. So I think we all have some version of this like content fire hose. But I'm now really curious. 1,500. What is your process for navigating that level of content every week?
Use tools, right? So
What are you using? Yeah.
So I use Feedly. I used to use Pocket a lot, but Feedly you can subscribe on keywords, new searches. You can drop in RSS feeds from blogs. You put it in there, and then you just start scrolling. You're doom scrolling, and then you're like, oh, that's potential, and then you stick that, you tag it, right? Then you go back through all the things you tagged, and then you start figuring out like, oh, that was just a headline. That's a horrible article. So you delete that, but you kind of narrow it down through there. And then we show up to the show. I have my 20 things I think I want to talk about. Blake has his 20 or so articles. Neither of us know what each other's bringing to the show. And that's what's been kind of magical, because we're able to like bounce off, and there's no big production meeting, right?
Yeah.
We keep it very organic, and it's more like a jazz riff, right? Blake has a story about this. I'm like, oh, I got a story that kind of ties right into that. And then that's how the show is. And then whatever doesn't make the show. It must not have been important enough to talk about.
Yeah. How long is an average episode?
About 55 minutes, hour and 5 minutes. And they keep creeping up slowly but surely.
Yeah, I mean, pretty soon, depending as you guys get in a groove, I don't know, you might end up in that, the crazy 3-hour mark that seems to be becoming more and more popular.
Blake thinks he can do it. Blake's like, I could sit there with the microphone by myself and talk for 3 hours now. Blake thinks he could do it. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's amazing. Sometimes I look at these episodes, and there's probably been one or two, and I love podcasts. We're on a podcast now. I mean, my goodness,
Yeah.
I'm like 3 hours. I'm like, ooh, that's but they become so popular. I was like, are people really listening a full 3 hours? Or they get in the first 40 minutes? They're like, oh, I love it, but I don't know if I love it 3 hours worth. I don't know that maybe.
But you can do it when you do other stuff, and that's the beauty of podcasts. What I've always loved is it's on demand, and I can do it when I do other stuff. I can't watch a YouTube video when I'm walking the dog. I can't, if I'm doing laundry, if I'm doing landscaping work, but I can listen to a podcast and do that stuff. And that's
100%.
That's the difference, right? So you can consume this in ways you can't consume, or you're driving on a long road trip, and then you can listen to it faster if you want,
Yes, I love it. Yeah, 1,500 articles a week. You feed it through Feedly. You're tagging potential. You doom scroll to get the potential. Then you're just mining articles, and you're looking for your top 15.
Then I'm reading them, making some notes.
Yeah.
Being like, well, that's interesting. Then next thing you're on a Google search dive, right? Like, that doesn't make sense. And then, you put work into articles. Sometimes you don't even talk about it on the show. I spent time working on that last week. I didn't have that half hour back.
So maybe final question on the podcast. Yeah. What's been the most, if you have this data available, and it's okay if you don't, because I didn't tell you I was going to ask this question, most popular episode last 12 months? You recall which one? Was there one that caught storm? Because
we keep growing, there's always the biggest one. But the biggest one that probably got a lot of attention was I got fired from an accounting firm. So now that I'm a business owner, I'm a customer of accounting firms, right? And I got the true client experience, and I got cut from an accounting firm because you've had accountant coaches and things on, right? What do they tell people? You got to cut, right? And really the main reason for the cut is revenue per. I'm not as big as the other clients, but the main reason, they just don't have bodies. Like firms don't have bodies. And so that was the single episode, me getting fired. David got fired from an accounting firm. But really that story is the story which has been almost touched in every episode of this year, which is there's no accountants. We have a talent shortage and a talent crisis, right? And that's really the bigger story, which is the reason I got fired.
Help me understand this experience. Was this a phone call? Was this an email? Was you get referred out to another firm? Hey, we found another place for you to land, or was like, we got to make this happen. It's a tough call. We love you, but you got to go. Goodbye. I mean,
yeah. So to even frame it how like crazy it is, I'm personal friends with the CEO of this firm. So it's a fairly big firm. It's a top 200 accounting firm, and then so I know people at the firm. It's just, this was a simple math thing. Now they send out letters, and there was a lot of clients that got let go. And I've talked to them, it's a significant amount. Like they let go of more revenue than most firms I know that bring in as revenue.
Wow.
Right. And they just had no choice. You don't have bodies. The person that was doing my tax return, I talked to her, and she basically was like, I took 3 days off last year. Like I didn't leave, you know what I mean? Like I'm at an age, and it's not, there's not, they care about their clients. They're trying to do the work, right? It's not the people that's the problem with the experience. It's just, if there's not enough bodies, you just can't service that many clients.
So what did you do?
So I got referred to a different accountant, and I still have yet to onboard because it's just sitting in, I have a PDF onboarding form that I have yet to open up.
Yeah, of course. Because
So basically, I don't have my taxes done. Yeah.
So I know you had a popular piece of content around TurboTax Live that you went through. I don't want to regurgitate everything. We'll link it up in the show notes. Yeah. But scale 1 to 10, where did that sit for you? And we'll unpack maybe a highlight and a low light from that experience.
Yeah. So Blake and I, we have one of our business entities, the production company that's in the middle. We wanted to test it out, because if you look online and tax Twitter, and everybody is like, so those people at TurboTax Live, they screw up the taxes. They do that. Like, there's just a very negative opinion. But we were kind of wondering, did anybody ever actually try it yet?
Yeah.
So let's try to use it for our
It's
taxes.
so easy, and I understand why, but it's so easy. You can almost extrapolate this for any competitor.
Yeah.
You know, where you just like, instead of like investigating why they're a viable option, you just are like, you take the 1 to 2 little headlines you read, and you're like, oh, it's garbage. Yeah, nobody likes it. I don't know. You must be insane to do that. Yeah. It's like rinse, repeat applied to taxes, pizza, and anything. It's like people really downplay their competitors too much sometimes, and they miss the learnings.
And Intuit getting into business returns is a whole new step in this TurboTax Live March that Intuit's on, right?
Yeah.
So we're like, all right, let's just do it on our return. We'll document the whole thing, and then we'll just let firm owners check it out. So there's a YouTube video. Yeah. It's about an hour long. You can watch it. We document from when we went and like opened up the website and signed up to our returns, and recorded the phone calls we had with the EA that we were assigned, and went through the whole process. I think the two big learnings is, well, overall, we'd probably do it again. It was decent. It wasn't too painful, but a lot of it's the onboarding and documents and setting expectations. They didn't have proper expectations set. Apparently, somehow we did not get assigned. There's like an account manager first, and then you get handed off to the EA. Maybe we didn't get assigned to the account manager first. There was, you do things like, oh wait, now we need this bank statement. Now we need this thing. And there's a little of that dance going on versus just, here's everything you need up front. So I think that's something that faces all firms, right? How you onboard and
so they haven't solved that either.
They haven't solved that either.
A little bit better than here's a PDF. Hopefully you get this back to me at some point.
Yeah, a little better than that.
Yeah.
And then the other takeaway is price. We paid $1,500, and it was full assisted. So they did all the work, really. We just uploaded profit and loss, bank statement, our operating agreement, and things like that. And you really think about the like level setting, right? This gives, so many firms are doing a business return like that we had for $400. Yeah. It's like, it proves you have, even if you think,
so interesting. So they're not coming in as the low cost business returns for $99.
Exactly. So you have room to go up market. You could still be cheaper than them, but you could do it for $1,200, and you start probably doubling your prices because you now have a reference point on price. So it's a good video if you're a firm owner, if you're doing tax, or even if you're not doing tax. I think just to see how Intuit's attacking the client experience. Yeah, we go through the whole process.
Is that in part of the puzzle to get us out of this talent issue? So everybody is, a large swath of firms dramatically underpricing. If you increase your price, pay your people more, you might be able to attract more people to it, but it's not like an overnight fix, right? It kind of cascades down, or there's a shortage in the pipeline. I don't want to disregard that, but sometimes we also look at like, I don't have the money to keep them in the industry or to do this. It's like, well, if you're spending $400 on a return, Intuit's doing $1,500. Goodness gracious, you have so much opportunity there.
But you think about the firms, right? And they all go through the cycle, right? So I was fired by my firm because they want the average client fees to be, X higher.
Yeah.
So now I'm going to go to this other firm, and that firm's probably listening to whatever accounting coach they're listening to. That's like, try to get higher paying clients, and then that person's going to let go of his $100 clients, right? And just keep, and then all of a sudden you're going to have this swath of these clients that are probably B minus, C plus clients that they pay, right? They're not DNF clients, but
Yeah.
there's millions of them.
Yeah.
Where do they get their accounting services from? If the firms are going to raise prices and price them out because you only want, that's the coaching mantra, you're going to have, and Intuit estimates that I think it's a $20 billion TAM, addressable market. They are, this is just an unserved piece of the market. And they're proving it because I think like TurboTax Live and their assisted live, their new commercials and all that, they're like, have somebody else do the taxes for you, or don't do taxes. These are their fastest growing products they've ever launched, right? So obviously there's a need in the market for mass produced accounting services. And for me, the best thing about all of this, of Intuit getting in the accounting business, is all the accountants and bookkeepers will benefit, because Intuit is now suffering the pain and they have financial reasons to solve it.
Mm-hmm.
So if there's this like bug in QuickBooks, or this nuance with the QuickBooks Accountant Edition, or
a fantastic way to dog food your product, huh?
Right. And now all accountants should start benefiting from a lot of these things. I think they started to add like uncategorized features and reconciliation dashboards, and that's all stuff they're probably building for themselves first, right? And their live product. So the whole industry would get a benefit of this. But I mean, in the short term, it does seem like, oh, they're stealing our clients, but they're not. All of you firms are firing clients. They're just scooping up all the people you don't want. They're not really stealing clients. I mean, nobody's stealing clients from anybody. There's none.
Well, and for you all, I mean, on the flip side, there'd be coaches that say, well, niche down. And so like, podcasters or media companies, almost regardless of average contract value, if they kind of fit your industry that you want to really have exposure into, then it's fantastic. But those are few and far in between, and they do require marketing engines to kind of get a national notice on, we help podcasters, or we help media production companies. It is interesting, but just part of me thinks coach is saying, rank them, stack them up, fire the ones you don't want. Like, I'd love, if you're listening and you've ever had a coach that told you to do the opposite and it's working, I'd love to have you on the show, because when you start hearing the same thing over and over and over again, you're like, goodness gracious. So I'm going to have a podcast episode in a year and somebody's going to be like, I didn't do any of that. And gosh, does it work so well.
So we've talked to people, but they've gone niche, where they're able to build like a $200 a month bookkeeping practice, but it's super niche, like
interior design, landscape,
or Kellen, or whatever the big real estate agent, Keller
Williams.
Yeah, right. Only those real estate agents. It's very niche. That you can set up the same chart of accounts, the same templates for every client. I've seen somebody that only does Instagram fitness influencers.
Wow.
Right? And you start building.
You get them all.
You just, if you can go really niche, you really can get your processes tight to where you can stay down low prices. But in general, like, there's just a lot of clients just being let go, and where do they have to go somewhere. Right.
Yeah. So to ask you a question where we get to just really blue sky it.
Yeah.
Why do you think Intuit's charging $1,500 and not $500?
I think Intuit tested into it. Like, Intuit's one of those companies where they will test and test and test and test and test and figure out how much this is going to cost. In this case, it's really $700, but they didn't support. So there's the full assisted, and then there's you kind of do some of it on your own and you're getting some help.
I see.
That's not in all states. So we're in Arizona, so we had to get the full service one. But
okay.
Yeah, so they're testing into it, what's going to be the right pricing. I think initially they had very low prices for these services, like QuickBooks Live and stuff, super low. And right. I think it was just to see who would bite. And then that gets you those first customers. And now you can start to fix your processes, figure out what's working, not working. You can always change the prices. And that's what Intuit, every year they raise the price of QuickBooks.
Yep. Well, just to circle back on something you mentioned, that's, I don't know if I've heard a lot of great answers, but I think you all have talked more at length about the talent shortage and the pipeline shortage. And it's like, well, AI might solve some of it. Well, fixing fixing levels of work-life balance or compensation. So more university students will kind of fix it. Offshoring more, tapping into the freelance economy. Some of those things you could do tomorrow as freelancers. Other things like, the real systemic things is a longer problem. What have you seen, going through all the news stories? So 1,500 a week times 52 weeks. I don't know. We'll just call
Yeah.
it three quadrillion news articles a year that you're looking at. What bright spots have you seen in folks solving the talent?
Oh, bright spots. Okay.
Who's where
That's the hard part. Yeah.
is this ever going to be solved? Right? Like, where are we going with this?
I mean, I have a slightly skewed view because these are the people we hang out with, like Chase Berkey with Dark Horse CPAs, Kenji Karamoto with
Yeah, we had the
Acuity,
Kenji on.
right?
Yep.
Yeah. We know these younger firms that are trying to do a different model. They're trying to either give their employees equity. They're trying to, not put them on this 30-year track to partnership. They're giving them higher starting salaries. They're giving flexibility in their schedule and working environments. So there's firms that are doing the new model, right? That's going to help. But when you still, going back to the grand scheme of the size of the accounting industry, almost nobody's doing a new model. Everybody's still doing the old model. Universities are kicking people out the same way. They're pumping them into the Big Four. That's their only goal. Big Four burns them out in 2 years and they leave the industry. And so there are people doing the right things, but until salaries go up, until working environments go up, it's going to be a problem for a while. But I think the reason it's such a big problem right now is I think over half, maybe 70% of the ICPA members are already eligible for retirement. So you're at this cliff and there's not much filling the bottom side of the cliff. And that could be good. Maybe it needs to happen, right? Maybe it needs to hit rock bottom. But I think you're starting to see firm leadership, younger leadership, not official leadership, right? But more because they're actually doing it in their firms. There's not just talking about this stuff. I think you're starting to see firms do this. It's just, I don't think there's no magic wand with anything. It's going to take time. For me personally, I think
the younger firms, are they complaining about talent shortage, or they're like, it's bad, but it's not as bad as everybody else's, like, because we've solved these things.
No, I think everybody's trying to hire people. Yeah, like it's
yeah,
really
but are they
hard.
having
but it's different because they're basically trying to steal people from the bigger firms.
That's it.
Right?
Yeah.
But everybody's short. I mean, even if you're like, I need a bookkeeper, it's hard to hire right now. And this is also all industries, it's not true to just accounting. I think the impact of this is starting to get real. Like smaller towns can't get an audit done, so then their credit ratings go down, and then they can't build a fire station or buy a fire truck because they can't get a loan, right? And so it's starting to become real. And I think it might be autoparts.com, like one of these big auto parts retailers, they delayed their earnings reports and they called out the reasons they don't have accountants.
Holy
they're
cow.
short staffed, right? So it's starting to become real. I think this is just the tip of the fuse, right? What happens when 10 companies say, hey, we don't have our earnings done because we don't have accountants, or 30 or 40 or 50 or 100 companies.
Yeah. I mean, it just does feel really like a slow burn, right? So you have these younger companies that are maybe trying to drive stronger comp models or better work-life balance, allow them to, find their way into some sort of meaningful ownership percentage, all these things that kind of attract folks. But, a large part of this is kind of like you said, it's like a poaching play. Like, hey, before you quit the industry, why don't you come over to this beach and water's so much better, right? So it's like you're trying to poach people away, but, it's really hard to shift compensation models at the Big Four. It's obviously, and then the question is, like, on the university front, they're like, gosh, get a degree in accounting, you're going to get a job. And yeah, it's a lot of work, but hey, I mean, you're young, you're going to, what I mean? Like, I don't know how incentivized the university pipeline is, because it's like job placement. Yeah, you're going to get a job. Look, there's no jobs. This is the great thing to go into. And, they're like maybe not feeling the pain, but it feels like a slow grind for the broader industry to figure this out.
Well, I think in the olden days, like, no word wouldn't get out to a freshman in college about how miserable it might be at a Big Four job.
Yeah,
but
now
with
TikTok,
you have Reddit, you have TikTok, so it eventually impacts them, people joining the accounting industry. But I think for me, it's the bigger. I think there's two things that could be fixed that could help a lot. Right? You have for whatever reason, Accounting 101 is used as the weeder class to get people out of the business school. So they take Accounting 101. It's almost like microbiology for doctors, right? They use microbiology or microchem. I don't know how to take it. Biochem. One of those classes.
I wasn't
right?
pre-med, but yeah.
I wasn't pre-med either, right? They use one of those classes to like weed out the doctors. And unfortunately, they're using Accounting 101 that way. They take Accounting 101, they put 500 students in this big class. It's usually some old adjunct professor that has tenure, not adjunct, tenure professor, right? He's mailing it in usually, right? It's probably an old white male guy. He's mailing it in, probably still using an overhead projector with a fan, can't hear over it. And people's first experience with accounting is so horrible, right? So right there, you're knocking hundreds of thousands of potential accountants out of the market just with Accounting 101.
Mm-hmm.
And then let's say somebody makes it through and they become an accountant. Highly likely, if they've gone to the university, they get an accounting degree, they are going to be working for the Big Four, who basically runs them to death on the treadmill for 2 years and they burn out. So you're taking this huge population of potential accountants. You're getting so many of them to not even major in accounting or not even major in business because you give them, you basically scare them off with a horribly taught class. And then the ones that do make it out, you burn them out. So 2 years into their career, they quit accounting entirely. Like if you could just fix those two things, right? That would be helpful. But we purposely drive people away from our industry. It makes no sense. Like we're pushing them away. And then obviously you have the 150-hour rule, which complicates it, right? To sit for the CPA exam, you got to take an extra year of school. Like there's all these other things that really complicate that, but that's an easy one. Just get rid of it. Like just do experience because that's just another thing keeping people from becoming accountants, right? But accounting is used as like the whipping tool to get people to not be business majors. It's horrible. Like use marketing. Do a marketing 101 to get people out of business school. I don't know. Like give Accounting 101 should be an amazing, great experience, right? In college.
Yeah,
and it's not for most people.
There's maybe a either potentially unspoken incentive or an assumption 50% should drop. And so because it's been that way forever or whatever it is, whatever the percentage is, you're like, that's normal. I mean, is that normal? Should that be normal? Right? I mean, yes, some attrition is normal. Maybe not a 50% drop. Yeah,
I don't know the exact numbers on this, but I mean, I remember sitting through it. It's the same way now. Like Accounting 101 classes are ridiculously big at universities and they're taught poorly.
Now I'm going to ask you a question. Obviously, I'm in the world of tech and software. You're exposed to this a lot. So I'll say these two letters with a lot of trepidation, but will AI, start to solve some of our crunches? I mean, there's obviously things you see it in the field and some experiments and some prototypes of what's happening. And there's some real admin work that's being cut off by the use of, chat GPT prompts. And so it all seems trendlining very exciting, but have you seen any material impact or have you seen topics or news headlines or firms really benefit from this yet?
It has to, right? It's going to. I think you're going to see more personal productivity booms from that. But I also see like things and going back to the tax onboarding, that PDF, the onboarding.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That seems like a very, and one of these companies are going to do it, either the Canopies or the Tax Caddy, one of these onboarding companies with the portals are going to figure this out because the dance, and then we went through the same dance with TurboTax. They start to do your return. Oh, we need this. Then they take you and they put you on hold and then you go and get what you need. You upload it. Now they start doing some more. Oh, I need this. And there's that dance. And in theory, that dance could just be AI going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth with the client, asking the questions.
Yeah.
Upload this stock. Like, you're great, I have this stock. But now that because you sent me this stock, I saw this one line. Now because you filled out a number on that line, now I need these two other docs. Right. And that dance could be done to where when it's finally time for the tax preparer to sit down to do the return, it's all there. Right. Like everything's there. There's not that start and stop. So there's just these little productivity gains people could get from it. And then I also think it's just going to be built into apps. Like even Intuit said they had 700 patents on AI already. Right? We're going to see, stuff built out, in the products. And there's a lot of even products we have in our own space. People are starting to add some, for emails, right? It'll write the email for you. They're starting to add AI into our stuff. It's coming. It's just, I think right now it's still a a dice game.
Yeah.
That makes any sense. It's predicting the next word, and so that's where they call it hallucinations, or it's wrong. And I'm like, I just need it to like remember something when I teach it, because it can do stuff. You can kind of teach it, but the way the model is right now, it doesn't store what I teach it for next time. So if I
Yeah.
teach it to get the flight data out of my email and then put it on my calendar, and I like to have like the departing city and the airplane emoji and the city I'm going to as the subject, and and then also when you add this appointment to my calendar, add an appointment 2 hours before that says drive to airport and put the address of the airport in, and you can get it to do all that for you just from pasting in an email. The problem is a week later, it can't do it anymore.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's like when it becomes truly like a personal assistant, that's where the really productivity gains are going to be. It's just not there yet. It's close though. And that's what's frustrating, because the promise is right there.
Yeah. It feels there's a level of it's an inevitable opportunity that's going to show up, and we don't need to go down this rabbit hole because I feel like it's been talked ad nauseum, but crypto is kind of always in search of like unlocking that use case that feels like it would light fire. And I think it's there. Like I haven't given up on where that line of technology can go, but people have tinkered enough with, Bard or ChatGPT-3 and all the other AI tools that are coming out. It's like, gosh, there's real potential here. And then with that, goodness knows the amount of capital that's coming from the venture community to progress tech. And, literally OpenAI came out of left field, right? This is literally
It came
Google's turf.
very fast. And I would
Yeah.
argue like it's got legs that you didn't see. The metaverse and virtual reality, didn't get legs. Blockchain really never got legs. This has legs, real legs, and it's happening fast. And even I think KPMG, they're spending $2 billion on AI stuff internally and training and all that, but they think they can produce $12 billion of revenue from this.
Yeah.
Like over the next 5 years. So, and Microsoft, I don't know if you saw, like they just announced they're going to charge, I think, $30 a month for you to have their Copilot added to your Microsoft Office per employee,
Mhm.
right? That's a lot of money, because every employee is going to get $30 of value out of that, and you as the company is probably going to get way more value out of that. And so the money's there. People are going to spend money on this. And
Yeah.
even if you don't use it for anything but writing rough drafts, every time you have to write something, it writes your rough draft, and then you go in and clean it up. Huge productivity boost, just from that.
Honestly, if it would come in, like you said, I think the memory is an important facet of it, right? Because if it came in and literally my inbox became a draft inbox, right? Like, based on your behavior, I'm
That's
gonna,
a good use case.
you know what I mean? Like
all the
I just
replies are ready to go, and you just hit send or
I'm just
tweak
looking
them.
at replies and I'm adjusting it and it's learning from my adjustments, but everything's kind of being rough draft in the inbox. And I was going through it, send. I mean, it would be, and if for long emails, these are the worst, right? I'm sure you get long emails. You're like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to like really sit down and read this thing, right? And like, maybe give me the little summary. I'm gonna go in the email, look at the draft. Okay, let me kind of gauge it, and then also surface rules. If you see me doing things repetitively in my inbox, being like, hey, can you just maybe build this up? Yes. Okay. Well, then integrate Zoom with Inbox with your Google, and I actually be able to make this happen. Oh,
But
fantastic.
I mean, I think we've all done that. You have to write a blog post, right? And you open up Google Doc or Microsoft Word, and you type
Yeah.
full sentences, and you delete it, and you type some more, and you backspace, you type some more. 4 days later, like you literally have the Google Doc still open with nothing on the page, right?
Yeah.
And now I'm like, I can type like a couple sentences, and 15 seconds later, I have a good enough starting point. You have that first draft that you can start working from. And that's a 20-30% boost in your productivity, because you're not, doing that rough
Yeah.
draft over and over again.
I'll give you one more rabbit hole before
Yeah.
we wrap up. But I mean, for content creators, it's kind of exciting because in theory, the more content you produce, podcast, written, video, whatever, it's going to learn how you write. And so if you're like, I need something on this topic, you're like, they're going to grab all your insights from the past, maybe hyperlink it for you and kind of pull out, we'll call it novel intersections, but it can kind of learn how you approach a subject and find research based off of that, and then pull your past library of your content and actually make an even stronger draft out of the post.
Yeah. And this is the difference between like intelligence right? If that makes any sense. So I've used it sometimes to help me write ads for the
Yeah.
pod. So we do advertisements on the podcast, and I'll have it, and I'll give it the old ads, and then I'll say, hey, write a new ad for this company using these bullets, using the style of these other ads I uploaded before. And it'll write an ad, and it'll put a sentence in that says, and this app, and Jetpack Workflow syncs seamlessly with QuickBooks Zero and Bill.com. And like the app literally didn't do any of that. It just because I had that sentence in my previous ads, it said, so it's using intelligence, but not really smart intelligence, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's intelligent enough to know, well, that's been in the previous ads. Maybe it should be in this ad, but it's not taking that next step of like, is this really true? Right. And so like, I was like, wait a second. If I wasn't paying attention, I would run with it. And I had to go research. Like, oh wait, Jetpack Workflow doesn't do that. And I'd have to go delete that out of the ad. And so it's just that's the part that's insane about this, right? If you don't, you have to babysit. It's like having an intern, you have to babysit. But
yeah, that's a fair assessment, right?
But it's worse because it's like a new intern every week. And that's the problem. I want an intern that I have to babysit, but they at least remember something we did in the past. That's just a little bit. Like I don't want to start with a new intern every week, and that's where I feel the struggle. But it does save time. I was on an airplane flight, and I had to get some JSON data out into Excel, and I don't know. I just didn't have the patience to like jump through the Excel wizard to the help file. I couldn't get to work because this JSON file had some extra stuff in the header. It was just too much work. I just went to ChatGPT. I said, take this JSON file, pump it out into a CSV, and it did it.
See, that's where it's magical. I mean, anything from a programming perspective, and GitHub has its own Copilot. And so there's some really magical things happening on that front. David, this has been a blast. I feel like there's a million other topics we can dive into.
Go 4 hours. You could have a 3-hour podcast.
Yeah, right. This could become one of them easily. If people want to reach out and say thank you, follow your work, follow your pod. Hopefully everybody's been listening so far. What's the best way for our community to connect with you?
I'm on all the socials. Super easy to find. Just David Leary. Just all one word, David Leary. And then Earmark is just earmarkcpe.com. Or just go to the Google Play and the Apple stores, and you can find it there. And then the Cloud Accounting Podcast is a new domain. So it's accounting.show. Accounting.show. Yeah, that's it.
Cool. Rock and roll. We're going to link everything up. We'll link everything up at jetpackworkflow.com/blog. We'll link up the video we referenced earlier. We'll link up the podcast. I encourage everybody to go take a listen. If you enjoyed today's interview, leave a 5-star review. And if you really loved it, if David said something, you're like, gosh, I love the way he talked about insert whatever, client experience, AI, pricing, talent crunch, share it with a fellow firm owner that needed to hear something from him today. I know it's a great way to say thank you for David for coming on. David, it's been a real treat.
Great. Thanks for having me, Dave.
Thank you for joining Growing Your Firm, the podcast series for global, small, and medium-sized businesses ready to scale and increase profits. You can check out more podcasts by following the links in the show notes. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you're listening. At Jetpack Workflow, we're all about maximizing returns for accounting firms and CPAs. Check out more podcasts on growing your firm and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.